Welcome back. Day 20 of Hammerween with our second visit to the Karnstein trilogy. As always, we're going to jump right in with plot synopsis, then review. So, we left the Karnsteins mostly dead last week with the vampire lovers, and we return this week, 40 years later, for as we're told from the outset, every 40 years the Karnsteins can be resurrected, which kind of takes a little bit of the point of an ending for a film kind of out of the equation, doesn't it? You'd think you'd bury them very deep, very, very, very securely if they can just come back every 40 years. Anyway, such is the nature of the beast. We start here with the resurrection of Camilla, previously played by Ingrid Pitt, who's now played by Ute Sternskard. Sounds a bit right for the pronunciation. But downgrade, downgrade. She's a downgrade. We'll get into that. She is brought back to life by the Countess and the Count Karnstein, who were never quite aware of at this point of the power structure. In the previous film, it very much seemed like she was calling the shots, but there was a mysterious man in black who was looking out for her affairs, who in this film they just call Count Karnstein. They don't bother saying just the man in black. We'll kick on with the plot then. A young writer comes to town, Richard Lestrange, played by Michael Johnson, and he is investigating witchcraft and vampirism, etc., etc., for the purposes of potentially writing a new novel, that being his main career as a somewhat renowned, famous novelist. He is investigating the ruins of the old Karnstein castle, and he's set upon by three voluptuous young women. Are they vampires? Oh my goodness. No, it's a fake out, a very rare fake out for Hammer, where there are three young girls from the finishing school, which has just been opened in the grounds of the old Karnstein castle. He takes a fancy to one of the young girls and to one of the teachers, bit of a lech. But he decides that, well, maybe we're sticking around then. This school has a couple of teachers. Susanna Lay as Janet Playfair, who seems to be the kind of dance teacher, PE teacher kind of thing. Ralph Bates, the wonderful Ralph Bates, as Giles Barton, who's the history teacher, but spends most of his time teaching them about black magic, I guess if it's on the curriculum. But they're waiting for an English teacher. So step in the famous novelist who intercepts the English teacher who's en route and says, don't worry about it. You've been called to Vienna for a much better job. Just off you pop. I'll take the job so I can be with the young schoolgirls. Some of this film doesn't date terribly well. Anyway, he does so, takes the job under the auspices of Miss Simpson, who runs the school, along with Ralph Bates's Giles Barton. As he does so, a new student has just been enrolled, Mercala Herritzson. Herritzson. Mercala Herritzson. Anyway, Mercala is the most important part. As we know from last week, all of Carmilla Karnstein's aliases are, if not anagrams, then pretty much just changing syllables around. So, of course, Mercala is Carmilla Karnstein. They do treat that as somewhat of a reveal halfway through. It's never in doubt, never in any doubt whatsoever. So Carmilla Karnstein, under the name of Mercala, is one of the students at the finishing school now. So she is being taught by Ralph Bates. She's been taught by Richard Lestrange, Michael Johnson, and she's been taught by Janet Playfair. Different things. She's different from Ingrid Pitt. She's certainly younger and more naive. She genuinely does seem to be giving herself over to study. She's a much younger seeming. She's younger in real life anyway. But certainly you can't imagine Ingrid Pitt going to school at this point with all the young girls. But here, Carmilla does. She takes a fancy to one of the girls, and they have a bit of a tryst overnight. Susan Pelly, and Carmilla has a thing with her, but then kills her because, vampire. And Susan, of course, now is missing. Miss Simpson covers this up, the head teacher, because she doesn't want scandal at her newly opened school. It doesn't arouse too much suspicion because the body's found by Ralph Bates himself, who throws it down a well. What's all that about? Well, it turns out he isn't just teaching those girls about black magic because it's part of the local history. He's obsessed with it and he wants to serve the Karnsteins and serve Carmilla. She's got no interest and bumps them off. So we're two down already. A local chief inspector is sent to eventually look into the crimes that potentially may have been committed, although everyone maintains that it's no crimes. It was, as we're wonderfully told, a heart attack. Because Count Karnstein is posing as a doctor, and his only lines really are to come in when somebody says, "And what was the cause of death?" A heart attack. He says it twice in a ridiculously over the top fashion. Mike Raven plays the Count, Radio 1 DJ, but he's dubbed by Valentine Dale, doing his best Christopher Lee impression. So it's covered up as being heart attacks, but quickly some people are onto it that, no, come on, look at the necks. This town, maybe 40 years on, but we've not forgotten the Karnsteins. So Janet, the young dance teacher, she's insistent that we need to report all this and we need to get things sorted because clearly it is vampirism and there is stuff afoot. Doing my usual and filleting out a lot of the plot here. The Karnsteins are exposed. The villagers do get up in arms. They are rabble rousers and raise up the pitchforks, etc., etc., and chase the Karnsteins down to their castle on the grounds. So there's no great surprises in terms of where the film goes. It's pretty much part two of another Karnstein story from there, with the denouement happening at exactly the same set as Scars of Dracula. The top of Castle Dracula is also the top of Karnstein Castle, it seems. Exactly the same set. I think I'll leave that there for the plot synopsis because most of the heavy lifting is done halfway through the film, and then I can talk about aspects of it in the review. It's one of the least popular Hammer films for some people, this, and especially the least popular vampire films. I think it's got a lot to commend it. Ingrid Pitt can't be replaced, so I think, I mean, let's be honest, they chose Ute Stensgaard because she's young and voluptuous, but I think she brings a naivety to it that having it set in a school helps. Again, Ingrid Pitt wouldn't have worked in this. She wouldn't have been able to bring that schoolgirl mentality. But Ute has a vulnerability to her. Her relationship that she forms with Richard, the author and teacher, does seem to be very genuine. They do make love rather than her just baiting him. She lets him go with no threat to him whatsoever. So I think the film's also quite well titled in that regard because it is genuinely about the lust for a vampire from, say, Ralph Bates, who's obsessed with becoming one himself. But it's also the lust of a vampire because they have sexual desires here just as much as they have vampiric desires. So I think that's something quite clever in the script, actually. Ralph Bates is fantastic. Um, he's some people can say he's slightly miscast. He's definitely playing older than he was, but I think he brings a real knowing sense of what kind of film he's in. Susanna Leigh as Janet, undercooked, unfortunately. She should be the heroine of the piece, the one that puts it all together. And again, that would be quite fresh for a Hammer film like this to have a Barbara Shelley type who saves the day. But in one of these gothics, it does have to be a guy, unfortunately. So Richard is essentially and obstantially the hero. I'm not saying that word right at all. He isn't, let's be honest. He's preying on you young women. He also refuses to believe till very, 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 very late in the film that anything vampiric is happening whatsoever because he's thinking with his and not with his head. But again, that's thematic in the film. It's not unintentional, like Vampire Circus, where I think you're not aware of what you're doing. I think everything here is very intentional. And I think that's down to Jimmy Sangster as the director. He may not have written this film, but he certainly has his fingers all over it. You can feel his lack of irony and his sense of humor, complete with those moments of heart attack. That's not unintentional. That's a Sangsterism. As is one wonderful scene where the villagers are in the inn talking about how they're going to get rid of the Karnsteins. And one of them says, "Oh, that's no good. We don't need a doctor. What we need is..." And at that exact moment, the doors fly open to the inn, and a bishop just comes in and goes, "Hey." So what we need is a bishop. Yeah. It's brilliantly over the top. It's stupid. I mean, critics will again say, "Oh, isn't that coincidence?" It's a Jimmy Sangster. He knows exactly what he's doing. It's got to happen. I mean, you could put it down to divine intervention. That would make as much sense. It doesn't matter if you believe in vampires. Why not divine intervention? I think it works perfectly. It brings a sense of humour to the whole affair throughout the film, which I think you need because otherwise the film would be terribly po-faced. There's a good sense of investigation about the film as well, with I mean, again, I felt that these plot synopsis is down, but the Countess gets involved as posing as the mother of Camilla Karnstein, who's covering up these crimes. And oh, I'll make a, don't worry about it. I'll take care of the police, and we know how she will do. But I'll protect it, and we'll protect the good name of this fledgling school. So Miss Simpson gives in to that because she doesn't want her school's name tarnished so soon after being established. It's all very well set up. I think everything that's set up has a good payoff. Richard as the main character, Michael Johnson as the main character, Richard Lestrange, is an interesting lead because he's not a hero. This film doesn't really have a hero, which again is quite an interesting development for Hammer. There's no knight in shining armor here. He's extremely fallible to the very end of the film. To the very, very end of the film, he is not a hero in any way, shape, or form. There's no young, boring, heroic type who doesn't do anything wrong ever. The closest again we have to a hero here is Janet, the dance teacher. She should have been pushed more to the fore in an ideal world, but it's 1971, can't ask for miracles. Barbara Jefford nearly steals the show as the Countess. She's camping it up in those scenes where she's dealing with the administration of the school and how to manipulate them and whatnot. Ralph Bates gives a wonderful performance for the first half of the film till he's bumped off, but it's fine because he gives it enough energy to last for the first half. I don't think it would have sustained without him, to be honest. I think it needs a character like him who brings a different flavour to the snivelling servant type. The Clove in the Dracula film, very different flavour to it. And Ralph Bates, underrated Hammer icon for my money. Mike Raven is ridiculous as Count Karnstein because he's Radio 1 DJ. Mike Raven, it's ridiculous. It'd be like John Peel showing up as Dracula. He's dubbed by Valentine Dial, great character actor, but the dubbing just makes it all the funnier because he's got such a deep voice that doesn't match Mike Raven's face or his famous voice being a DJ himself. So when he intones, the heart attack, every time it'll just get a laugh. And it's intentional because, again, Jimmy Sangster directs. And Jimmy Sangster knows that if you can't be good, be interesting. It's one of his old kind of adages. And it's on display throughout this film where you can tell that he thinks, not a lot to work with here. Tell you what, I'll put in some of my own kind of sense of humor. Again, he didn't write it, but you can tell that he's kind of directed it in ways to set up a bit of authorship. Not terribly much, but enough to say, and a lesser director, another director. If this was even Roy Ward Baker, there wouldn't be those comedic beats that are very much intentional because they're not in the script. They're pure sangsterisms. Overall, I think this is a solid film. It's not as good as Twins of Evil. Sorry, or is it? We'll come to that next week. It's not as good as The Vampire Lovers, but it's not trying to be really. It's trying to be something a bit different, and I applaud that. To do something different with the same set of characters just 9 months later. I think it's very interesting. It misses Ingrid Pitt in terms of its overall quality, because Ute Sternsgaard just isn't as good an actress. But for the story they have to tell here, I think she's fine. And again, giving her a more lustful type relationship in the film, rather than just be a pretty young woman who's just a vampire but happens to also have sex with people. She genuinely has emotions here. She genuinely has lustful feelings, which I think gives a wonderful tone to affairs. And you can believe why Richard would fall for her charms because what do you mean she's a vampire? I've been having sex with her for a week now and she seems fine to me. So it's believable that he would be convinced that she's, nothing wrong with her. I've been there, don't worry about it. Yeah, I think this is underrated, honestly. I really think this is underrated. I'm not going to put it on a pedestal. It's probably even the least of the Karnstein trilogy. We'll make that assessment next week as we do Twins of Evil, but it's still 100 times better than Vampire Circus and is a damn solid Hammer vampire movie. For 1971, I think it ticks all the boxes. Um, may not be everybody's cup of tea, but I think it's perfectly fine. I think it does exactly what it needs to do to have some titillation for the audience that want that, to have some scares for those that want it, to have some comedy for those that want it, to have a decent little investigative uh, detective thing going on for those who want something a bit more procedural as well. So no complaints whatsoever. So even some really good visuals from Jimmy Sangster, who does some nice POV stuff, where we see everything from someone getting kissed, with the actor having to lean right into the camera, to someone being bitten in the same fashion, which again drawing parallels between the act of love making with the act of vampirism itself, which not a new notion, but to see it done from the point of view of the person who's either being kissed or slain, quite an interesting way to do it, I think. So yeah, bit of a long one, this, bit of a ramble, but it is what it is. Enjoy, folks. Should you have seen it, let me know what you think in the comments below. If you haven't seen it, I think you should. Join me tomorrow for, let me check. Let me check. Hold on while you're here. Join me tomorrow for, oh, The Damned. And then on Tuesday, back to Nigel Neal season, we'll do The Witches. And then we're going to do an adventure film on Wednesday, The Pirates of Blood River. Why not? So, till then, folks, thanks very much for staying with me. If you have, if you haven't, piss off. Because you wouldn't have heard me say that anyway, because you've left by now. So, sleep tight, folks, and I'll see you tomorrow for some oddness, is the only way I can really set up The Damned, but some oddness. See you then.